Welcome to True Seekers North East. Thank you for coming.
Why is that one's not working?
To put your phones on silent or vibrate, whatever, but hopefully we won't get any interruptions.
Thank you, Maureen.
You're welcome.
It's wonderful to be here again.
Yeah, Daniel's home.
This is my third visit.
Yeah, Daniel's you just speak how we've got. Oh, my favourite.
But you're my, you know, this is the favourite crowd, of course.
I know.
Apart from Cramlington. I have to be careful now, don't I? And apart from Birmingham. And all the other groups I visit. Apart from... Great. Well, let's dive in then. So the topic today is how to reach people, which is very important. Actually, we did have a bit of a discussion about this the other night in Cramlington, which was a very full and wonderful time. And we're going to particularly look at deconstructing the money system and presenting solutions from a new Bradbury pound to the gift economy. I just want to start with this wonderful quote attributed to Jimi Hendrix. I don't know whether he actually said it or not, but it's a really lovely quote.
He stayed in a house in Heaton.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
When Charles Chandler brought him over.
Yes. When the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace. Very, very well put. And here we've got William Patterson, who was one of the founders of the privately run Bank of England back in 1694. The Bank of England hath benefit of interest on all monies which it creates out of nothing. There you go. It sums it all up in one sentence, right from one of the founders. And here's Reginald McKenna, who was a banker and actually was a Chancellor of the Exchequer for a while. I'm afraid that the ordinary citizen will not like to be told that the banks can and do create and destroy money, and they who control the credit of a nation direct the policy of governments and hold in the hollow of their hands the destiny of the people. So these quotes are great for saying, well, did you know that there was Chancellor of the Exchequer back in the 20s who said this, you know? So really, the way we're framing this is, I'm sure you all know about the debt-based money system. I'm sure you all know about CBDCs, etc. So it's about how to put that across to people. And I'm sort of giving you useful tools to use in that regard. Well, just before I always like to thank those people that have helped me along the way. I've written this book in conjunction with Justin Walker, whose uncle was the director of the Bank of England. We're going to get into his story a bit more soon. I'd also like to thank James Corbett of the Corbett Report, John Hamer, who I know a lot of you know, I've had here a number of times. He's written a 2-volume book called Behind the Curtain, a chilling expose of the banking industry. Also, the makers of the Money Masters documentary, which was made in the 1990s, and I feel is still a fantastic way into this whole topic for people. It's about 3 hours long, I think. Charles Eisenstein, we're going to look at his work, particularly Sacred Economics, and just generally friends and family for their support. So let's set the framework here in terms of reaching people. And the guy to go to on this is David Sharanamboys, who is a behavioural scientist, but a good one. Not many of them around, unfortunately. But so part of what he does is he talks a lot about how the naughty, the ones working for the dark side, the behavioural scientists, how they're nudging people and all this sort of thing, using NLP techniques, etc., to get people to do what they want them to do. But he has a website called reachingpeople.net. I highly recommend you go and check it out. And he's got lots and lots of resources on there, and you can even do, for like a £5 or something, you can do online courses with him. And what he talks about is when we're approaching somebody with information that we feel is useful to get out into the world, we're often in a place of trying to traverse an obstacle course with a blindfold on. So what the work is that he's doing is he's helping us to take off the blindfold, so at least we can see the obstacles now in front of us, so we can navigate through and around them. So we're not going to trigger people to shut down, and hopefully, and to get them to engage with us. And it's not about being evangelical, as we'll see. It's not about foisting our ideas on others. No, it's about creating debate and creating a platform for issues to be discussed. So I'm just going to go through a list of things that he particularly emphasises in this regard, just to give you a flavour, and I'm hoping that a lot of you would then go on to check out his website and take this further. So when we're talking to people, we need to avoid shutdown, and that will happen when a person's ego is threatened. And we also need to think about managing our emotions. It's best to be calm and neutral. Yeah, and when we or other people are emotionally triggered, that's when people go into flight or fight, and they're not going to be receptive to information. So if we're able to be neutral, people aren't going to react more, they're less likely to react from a place of anger or whatever. It's also important to avoid the divide. Okay, really we want to be emphasising that we are all in this together. Yeah, that we're on their side. So it's about establishing common ground and empathy with the other person. That's the first thing to do. Rather than getting into a ding-dong situation, which is not going to take us very far. And of course, avoiding that pushy salesman, evangelist. When the Jehovah's Witnesses turn up the door, we don't want to know, do we? Because we can feel instantly they're trying to voice something on us. So it's about being calm and not having an agenda. Yeah. So cognitive dissonance is a big thing, and I'm sure you're probably already aware of this. So if we just start pushing against somebody's beliefs, they're gonna hold on to those beliefs even more. So a much better way is to start asking questions rather than presenting things and saying this is how it is. Just start asking questions, and definitely let people arrive at their own conclusions. And we're really trying to encourage people's curiosity, because once we've sparked someone's curiosity, that's when they'll go and do the research themselves, and they'll find out for themselves, and that's the best way for things to happen and to arrive at their own conclusions. And show, don't tell. So telling stories, using metaphors, pointing people to information, to resources, and of course respecting a person's dignity. We want to be respected, don't we? Mm-hmm. So it's just it's important for us to respect other people. Be gentle and kind. Be humble. Know your audience, because everybody's different, and they'll have their different trigger points and that sort of thing. And it's not about just we're going to tell them and we know all and we know everything. It's about listening as well, and a two-way process, a two-way dialogue. And finally, he talks about the hotel of knowledge, and I love this analogy. So we've got to think about the fact that at different, we've all come into this in different ways at different times. But say, just give an example, Maureen. How long have you been awake for, in inverted commas, roughly?
Probably since 9/11.
Yeah, since 9/11, so a long time.
2001,
Okay, so since 2001, so we're talking over 20 years,
I never
right?
believed in the detector van for the television lens as well. I was always suspicious of that.
You're always questioning, yes,
I
yes.
thought, nah.
But let's say since 2001, okay, so over 20 years. So you've had plenty of time to walk into this hotel of knowledge, look all around the lobby and check out what's going on that level, and then you've gone up to the next floor, the first floor, and you've checked out all the rooms there and seen what's going on there, and then you've gone up to the next floor and you ended up at the top floor of the hotel, and that's where we're talking about adrenochrome and chemtrails, and they're zapping us and they're doing all of this, right? Now, if you then look out the window from that top floor and you see somebody down on street level looking into the lobby with curiosity, wondering, I wonder what's in this hotel. If you start shouting to them from the top floor, adrenochrome, chemtrails, they're zapping us, they're the population control, they're just going to think you're bonkers. Now, what you have to do is you have to meet them at their level. So you have to go all the way down to the lobby, go outside and say, oh, I see you're curious. Well, I've had a look round this hotel. I'll show you around if you like. Oh, okay. So you take them by the hand and you start by taking them around the lobby. You start from that very basic level, and they have to work up the same way that we've all done. So a good example that I use in this regard is not this year but last year for the World Economic Forum Jamboree. It was all focused on solutions to climate change and the environmental emergency and everything. So a great way to approach people on that topic would be to say, well, so all these politicians and top people are arriving to talk about the environmental emergency and climate change and what we can do about it and solutions to all of this. Isn't it a bit odd that they're all arriving in private jets? It seems a bit hypocritical to me. What do you think? And I've also heard that not only that, but they get from the airport to the conference centre, they get a helicopter. So they're not even getting in cars to go to, and just, oh yeah.
Isn't it funny that us paying a charge sort of cancels out our damage we've done?
Yes. So anyway, the Hotel of Knowledge, it's a great analogy. So David Boys and his work. Now, what we're focusing on today is the money system. And for me, the money system is the way in generally for most people. It's the topic to start engaging with people on first. Because in my experience, pretty much everybody knows they're being shafted in this regard, but they don't know quite how. And of course, it's all smoke and mirrors. But they're curious, and it's the other great thing about this is that the nub of it is explainable in 1 or 2 minutes. And just that quote that we've heard from William Patterson, or the Reginald McKenna quote, reveals a lot in a very short period of time, yeah? And the great thing is it's a quote as well. It's from somebody who's been there and done that, part of the system. And once you see how a person sees how they're being shafted and manipulated and lied to in relation to the money system really is the centre of the spider's web in many regards, isn't it? So then I think they're much more likely to be receptive to questioning things like climate change or, whatever, the other topics. Anyway, let's get into this subject in greater detail. So we're going to just have a quick overview, and so please think about picking up ways to put this across to other people. As I say, I'm sure you're all aware of this, the basis of that base money system. So how, again, I'm just going to present ways that you can hopefully pick up on to pass this across to others. So, yeah, we're going to be talking about the way that the money is created out of thin air by private central bankers and then loaned to nations at interest. And this is how national debt's created, inflation, and it results in the siphoning off of much of the world's wealth to a small number of greedy, power-hungry individuals. And of course, this is the basis of the slave system we're in. Fractional reserve banking means whenever you take a loan out from a bank, such as a mortgage, rather than the bank giving you some of its own capital, it's creating both a credit and a debit in its ledger and charges you interest on it. In other words, it's a win-win situation for the bank. It's a complete fraud. You have to pay the bank the amount of the original, quotes, loan plus interest. And all the bank has simply done is a double accounting entry in its books. We're going to look at the move now to create cashless society by bringing in CBDCs such as the digital pound, which would result in the bankers having total control over our lives. We're going to look at how the City of London is the real power behind the UK Parliament. And in particular, we're going to tell the story of how the UK Treasury issued sovereign money in 1914, nicknamed the Bradbury Pound, to avert economic collapse, taking the printing and control of money in Britain out of the hands of private bankers for the first time in centuries. So this has been airbrushed out of history, this little episode. And we're going to look at how sovereign money leads to prosperity, peace, cultural enrichment, full employment and zero inflation. So bringing back the Bradbury Pound would bring about these positive effects once again for the British economy and people. Moving beyond that, we're going to look at decentralised solutions, which is really where I'm at. In particular, that runs from barter through precious metals, truly decentralised and democratic cryptocurrencies, local exchange trading schemes, and then even beyond that to potentially a moneyless society based on generosity, which we could call the gift economy, which is ultimately what my passion is. And also, as people who were at the talk in Cramlington on Thursday will know, I'm very much an advocate of getting off the mainstream systems, creating local systems to meet our needs, which includes, of course, means of exchange, and building resilience running alongside the existing mainstream systems. So this is what we could call creating a parallel society. Finally, let's just give the overarching way that where we're heading, which is breaking the shackles of the slave system we're in, taking back our power, and coming together in love and open-heartedness to be the guardians, stewards of an abundant, thriving, beautiful earth. Are you with me on that?
Yeah.
Great. I thought you might be. So Justin Walker, my co-author of the book, his uncle was a guy called Lord Pilkington, who attended the first Builder Group meeting back in the 50s and was a director of the Bank of England for quite a long time. Now Justin himself joined what was the Ecology Party in 1978. So he was around at the time when David Icke was part of that same crowd. So he's good mates with David, and of course the Ecology Party became the Green Party, and Justin served on the party council for 10 years before he left in 1992, having realised that they were basically pretty much getting co-opted into the globalist system. Now his uncle had already told him when he was a young lad that the City of London actually controlled Parliament, but he hadn't thought about it very much. But he then had what he calls his Richard Hannay moment. Do you know what Richard Hannay is? The 39 Steps. Do you remember that film or that book? So he had his Richard Hannay moment in 2012. Basically what happened is, out of the blue, he got this phone call from somebody who said he was the son of a person who'd been in the Bank of England at the same time as his uncle, and this old chap was on his deathbed, and he wanted to tell Justin, pass on some essential information to him. And he said that this was the big secret that would be the solution to all of Britain's economic woes. And all that Justin was told was research Bradbury, and then the phone went dead. And he thought, Bradbury? What's that all about, Bradbury? So he started searching for what anyway, eventually came across the Bradbury pound. And he then did 10 years of extensive research on the topic, and talking to insiders as well, because he had all those family connections. So I have to say that this book is really based on his research predominantly. So I'm very grateful to team up with him on that project. We're going to get into the story of the Bradbury pound later. So let's just quickly have a look a bit more at this debt-based money system. Of course, as I said earlier, it's all smoke and mirrors, isn't it? It's deliberately obscured. There's this impression given that the Bank of England is somehow part of the state or the government, but it's never said specifically that they're there to serve our interests. But of course, we're actually kept into the dark, in the dark, as to how this system operates. Actually, who gets to print the money, and thus the basis of the financial system, and therefore of political power as well. Well, the money system is totally based on debt, and the debt is all owed to private bankers. And in fact, the UK's national debt, currently about 2.5 trillion, is owed to these private bankers, which means that even if you paid off your credit card bill, you've paid off your mortgage, you haven't got any loans to banks or anything, you might think, oh, I'm not in debt. Well, actually you are, because every man, woman and child in the UK owes part of this national debt to these bankers, whether we realise it or not. And that debt is forever increasing. And the situation exists because the privately owned Bank of England prints money out of nothing, which it lends to the government at interest. So the UK is not a sovereign nation, despite Brexit, because it doesn't print its own money, along with all the other nations, which is virtually all of them in the world, with privately owned central banks. So the banksters, of course, are the real power in the world. And they don't create wealth, they just take wealth. We're the creators of wealth. Well, what did Master Amschel Rothschild, the founder of the Rothschild's banking dynasty, say in 1790? He said, "Give me control of a nation's money, and I care not who makes the laws, because I can pull the strings," in other words. And that means we're all hostages to these people. They have complete control over the economic life of the people. And will have even more control if the CBDCs come in, of course. Now, money itself is fine as a means of exchange, but the problem starts arising when we have usury, which is charging interest on money. In other words, making money itself a commodity and profiting from it. And then we get this fractional reserve banking, which started out by with a situation of lending out amounts far in excess of reserves, but it seems like they don't even often even have the reserves even a fraction of the reserves anymore, and they're still lending out just this, nothing really. But it's given value, of course, by our belief that it has value. So constantly the bankers are leeching from us, siphoning wealth out of the real economy and into their pockets. This is how inflation comes about. This is how the cycles of boom and bust come about. So here we go, some deliberate misnomers. The Bank of England, well, it sounds like very official, very part of the state institution. Well, if we just rename it, what it really is, which is the Bank of the Rothschilds and Co., UK branch, And the Federal Reserve in America is the Bank of the Rothschilds and Co. US branch. Just by putting that, dropping that in people's minds, it gives a whole nother perspective on things, doesn't it? And we could say the same for the many private central banks in the world, the European Central Bank, etc., etc. Here's another couple of quotes. James Madison, who was a US president: "History records that the money changers, in other words the bankers, have used every form of abuse, intrigue, deceit and violent means possible to maintain their control over governments by controlling money and its issuance." And what about Henry Ford, founder of the Ford car company? "It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." So there you go, that's our way in. If we can get people to understand the banking and monetary system, then yeah, there could well be revolution very, very soon. Well, what effect does this have on the ground? I'm just going to have a slurp of water. Well, it has many effects, of course, but just to give you an example, there was a report by Oxfam in 2020 saying the world's 2,000 billionaires have more wealth than the 4.6 billion people who make up 60% of the world's population. And of course we have BlackRock and Vanguard, these two private asset management companies controlling virtually all of the major corporations on earth. So we've got a huge concentration of wealth and power. Meanwhile, whilst this tiny few enjoy unbelievable wealth and power, of course, just to give one example, there's millions of children working in sweatshops or scrounging for discarded items on rubbish tips to help their impoverished and disempowered parents. So, yes, I like this Bob Moran cartoon. And it's not just the monarchy, but definitely includes the monarchy, of course. And, yes, well, do you remember Justin was told by his uncle, we control the UK Parliament, and has anybody heard of the City Remembrancer in this room? Hands up. Quite a lot of you, but not everybody. Well, I tell you what, vast majority of the population will not have heard of the City Remembrancer, and it's a great thing to drop into conversation. Do you know there's a guy called the City Remembrancer? Well, who is this person? He has a seat, and of course it's always a he, behind the Speaker in the House of Commons, and this person has been there for, this seat, if you like, this office, thank you, has been has been going on for a long time. It's not so relevant in the day of instant communications and mobile phones, etc. But it still really highlights how the City of London controls things, because this chap is there, he's unelected, he's unaccountable to us, to the voting population, but he certainly is accountable to the city. And what he's there to do is to ensure that all legislation going through is in accordance with the City of London's wishes. Now, you don't actually have to physically have a guy in Parliament these days to be able to do that. But of course in the old days you would have to do. But it continues to this day. And yes, so contrived boom and bust cycles, I mentioned it earlier. So what do these bankers do? What they do is they make money plentiful, they extend lending, and they create a boom. And a good example of this is the Roaring Twenties. And this is when real assets and resources are created and accumulated. And then so they've sort of let out the line of the fishing line, if you like, and then think, right, we want to reel them in now. So what they do is they start then contracting the money supply, calling in the loans, and people go bust, or they have to have their house repossessed or whatever. And a good example of that is the Great Depression, which followed the Roaring Twenties. And that's when the bankers can actually get their hands on real assets and resources. Because, of course, all this paper money they're putting out is valueless, isn't it? They don't want, okay, the paper money comes back to them at interest, but what they really want is the real resources. So this is the way they do it. And then we've got the Bank for International Settlements. Anybody heard of the Bank for International Settlements? Yeah. Again, yeah, quite a number of people. This institution is at the top of the financial pyramid. Do you hear it being talked about on the news? No. Is it ever mentioned in the Financial Times? No. And yet it's so key to the financial pyramid. These people at the BIS, they have diplomatic immunity, they're exempt from paying taxes, it's a private institution, they meet in total secrecy, completely unaccountable. What is the Bank for International Settlements? Well, it was set up in the 1930s by the governor of the Bank of England at the time, I can't remember what his name was, along with the guy who became the Minister of Finance under Hitler. And essentially what it is the central bank of all central banks. So it's ultimately where all the wealth flows to. Yes?
It's interesting to have a look at the guy who was the head of that. He's the original fat bank.
We're going to come to him. Yeah, we're going to come to him. Yeah. Don't worry. So there was a guy called Professor Carroll Quigley who wrote this book, Tragedy and Hope, A History of the World in Our Time, back in 1966. And he was a fearless historian who managed to gain the trust of the central bankers and was allowed to attend some of their most secretive meetings. And he then spilled the beans, basically. And this is what he had to say as a result. The powers of financial capitalism had a far-reaching aim, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. This system was to be controlled in a feudalist fashion by the central banks of the world, acting in concert by secret agreements arrived at in frequent private meetings and conferences. The apex of the system was the Bank for International Settlements, a private bank owned and controlled by the world's central banks, which were themselves private corporations. The growth of financial capitalism made possible a centralization of world economic control and use of this power for the direct benefit of financiers and the indirect injury of all other economic groups. In other words, you and me. So there you go, that sums it up quite nicely. And then now, of course, we've got the CBDCs looming, which is programmable money, as I'm sure you probably all know, which means that if these things manage to come in and people accept them, then the banksters will have absolute total control. They will be able to say, well, you're not able to spend your money because you've been a bad boy or bad girl politically, or you're only able to spend your money in certain areas, or you can only spend your money on certain things, etc., etc. And here we go, Augustine Carstens, who's the current head of the BIS, and as you were saying, is the absolute epitome of the fat cat bankster. I mean, literally, he looks like Mr. Creosote. He's enormous, and he looks like he's about to explode. And you can see this video clip of him in many places on the internet, where he's saying quite blatantly, in some official announcement of the BIS, there is a huge difference between CBDCs and cash. For example, with cash, we don't know who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who's using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is the central bank will have absolute control under rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability, and we will have the technology to enforce that. So there you go. In that one quote there, it sums it all up, what CBDCs are all about and where it's going to take us. Now, Thomas Jefferson, coming back in time, what did he have to say? He said, if the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, in other words, booms and busts, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. Sounds a bit like the Great Depression to me. I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs. So that was the founding fathers knew all about it right from the word go, and of course now since 1913 the banksters finally got their way after a number of attempts to get a private central bank in place in the US called the Federal Reserve. Here's another good little cartoon from Bob Moran. Because of course the media are all a big part of this as well. So let's dive into the Bradbury pound. This is something that even a lot of people who know about the debt-based money system haven't heard this story. And really Justin is the main person who's researched this and set out the whole history of it. It's set out in the book with lots of pictures and so on. So what is this? Well, back in 1914, at that time the banksters had engineered, along with a whole bunch of folk, but the banksters were a big part of engineering things to go into war, because they wanted war, because war means money, making money, it means achieving geopolitical ends, it means traumatizing people, lots of reasons to want war. Okay, now the British people were getting jittery because they knew war was looming, and so they wanted some security. And at that time the Bank of England notes, these promissory notes, were supposedly backed by gold. So people started queuing up outside the bank saying, I want to change my Bank of England note for the gold. Right, well of course the banksters, the central banksters, had issued more paper notes than there was gold. And they didn't want to run on the banks because then, it was going to scupper everything at this delicate stage of trying to get war up and running. So what the banksters did was they went to Lloyd George, who was the Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time, and the government in general, and they said, hey guys, what we'd like you to do is get us out of this bit, this tricky situation by calling an extended bank holiday for a few days, and then in the meantime issuing your own UK Treasury notes, so that when the banks open again after those bank holidays, we can give them those new notes rather than the gold, which we don't actually have. And of course the government did their bidding, and that's what they did. Within a short period of time they issued these notes, which became known as the Bradbury pound, because Sir John Bradbury's name was signed on it. He was the permanent secretary of the Treasury at the time. Now, what were these notes backed by? Sorry?
Is that where bank holiday comes from?
No, there were bank holidays before then, yeah. Now, what were these backed by? Well, they weren't backed by gold, these notes, but they were backed by the credit, wealth and creativity of the nation. So you could say, in modern terms, we might call that the gross domestic product, or the GDP. And this money was debt-free, interest-free money, and in fact, and I don't know why exactly necessarily, but I guess people had faith in the government, and these notes were accepted. So when the banks opened, the queues started again, the queues formed, people said, I want my gold. Well, actually, we can't give you gold, but we can give you these notes. And it was actually accepted by the people. And they were at a set and non-variable rate of value, unlike gold, which of course can fluctuate in value. And it created stability, prosperity, zero inflation and full employment. So if you get this right, if you put enough money into an economy to facilitate trade, but not too much that you then get inflation, or not too little that there isn't enough for the economic transactions to take place, if you get it just right, then this is the result. Stability, prosperity, zero inflation and full employment. Now this whole episode has been airbrushed out of history. And there's the first emergency, first batch of the Bradbury pound, just to prove to you that it did really happen. Only printed on one side, and there's Sir John Bradbury's signature, and we can see it says, if you can see the small writing, issued by the Lords Commissioners of His Majesty's Treasury under an authority of the Act of Parliament. So it's not saying Bank of England notes, I promise to pay the bearer. No, it's very different. And there's the second batch of the Bradbury pound. So what then happened, just to complete the story, so people had accepted this. It meant there wasn't a run on the banks. The economy was in really good shape, and there was a smooth transition into war, and the war got going. Now, of course, once the war was going, the banksters then went back to the government and said, hey guys, actually, you've got us out of a fix here, thank you, but we want to make lots of money out of this war, so we want to bring back our debt-based Bank of England notes. So over time, they were phased back in, and the Bradbury pounds were phased back out. But actually, the Bradbury pounds were still going as late as 1926. There was still some in circulation. And they were very, very popular. Now, another example of sovereign money that was issued was in America by President Lincoln back in 1861. And so what happened there was similar, well, kind of a similar situation. Lincoln was wanting to pursue the war against the South. He needed money for that, so he went to the bankers in New York and said, will you lend me some money for my war? And they said, oh yeah, we'd be happy to lend you some money. And you know, they said, but at this exorbitant interest rate. And Lincoln said, sod that, I'm just going to issue my own money. And he did, and he issued what became known as the greenback dollar, which again was very, very popular. And so it helped pay for the Union's victory in the American Civil War. And of course was again debt-free, interest-free money. Now, is it any coincidence that he then got assassinated? I don't think so. To go up against the bankers is, yes, you've got to be careful. So Justin Walker is, his big passion is bringing back a new Bradbury pound, a sovereign money solution, which is a sort of centralised solution, if you like. And yes, it would be simple, effective, and it has been proven. And the great thing is about it is that it's something that would be easily understandable by people, because it's the same way of transacting as we have now. It'd be, you know, notes and coins in your wallet. It would be, you know, balances in your bank account, but it would just be UK government issued money rather than Bank of England debt-based money. Of course, well, and Justin goes on to say, look, this would bring about stability and prosperity. Wouldn't have the contrived boom and bust cycles, etc., etc. But, and he readily admits this, of course, that the premise of this, of course, would be that whatever centralised authority, whether it be a regional authority or a UK-wide authority, would have to be, of course, working in the interests of the British people. Well, we can look at the UK Parliament and say, well, they're not definitely working in the interest of the British people. So, in theory, it's a great theory, and really, for me, it's a great story to tell, to just completely underlie and contrast with the Bank of England situation. So we can say, well, actually, this is how it's been since 1694, apart from this one episode. And when that did happen, it was a whole different story, right? But it's been airbrushed out. But here's the evidence, you know, there's plenty of evidence, and people would, you know, there's lots of people who've recorded this story that's documented in the book there. Yeah, so just going on about what, you know, people making people's lives better, etc., etc. Fair and reasonable return. How are we doing on time at the moment? It's coming up to 3.
We've got the room to 4.
Yes. Yeah. Is everyone with me still? You're happy for me to carry on? We'll have a break at some point. So we'll just go on and see how we go for a while longer anyway. So that's a centralised solution, a Bradbury-Pound type solution. But I think for myself, where I'm at is decentralisation, it's grassroots, right? It's bottom up. So I think essentially then that's where we can be taking charge of things. So just want to set the scene here with this quote from Buckminster Fuller. Some of you may know it. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Let's just get on with it, yeah? And start creating a better world now. This is what I mentioned earlier. It's about creating a parallel society, creating local systems and building resilience, running alongside the existing mainstream systems. And this is from a place of empowerment. We're not running in fear. No, we want to be creating a thriving society. Just getting on with it now, empowering ourselves, taking back our sovereignty. So, firstly, this is all really predicated on, you know, decentralised solutions are only going to work if we have a community of people who are connecting. We want to build our community, and it's great to see in Cramlington and here and Walkerville and around this area that you're already doing that, and you're already up and running, so you've got a big head start, yeah? And then out of these communities we can start creating these local systems, and then we're focusing, of course, on decentralised means of exchange at the moment. There's also a great way to find local people of a similar mind is through the UK-based Freedom Network. Yeah, so what do these decentralised solutions include? Well, there's going back to barter, okay? That's very simple, isn't it? I've got something you want, you've got something I want. We can just swap, yeah? But if we want to, but if I want something you've got, but you don't want something I've got, but you know, you might want something this person got. So we want to have a means of exchange. So we might use precious metals, or we might use decentralised community-driven cryptocurrency. Now, this isn't really my forte. I'm not really a techie person. Of course, a lot of people are really into cryptocurrencies, which is great. But in my research, what I would say is a really good example of what I'm talking about here is Quartal. And if you look in the resources section of my book, you'll find details about them. But they're really wonderful people who are looking to create a decentralised form of all the digital services that we use, which includes money. but also ultimately, hopefully, leading to a decentralised internet. And there are other ones out there as well, but Quartal is the one that I'd certainly know about and would trust. Yeah, another way of trading is through local exchange trading schemes, which is essentially using tokens. And essentially, you know, we're not looking at one size fits all. We can have a basket of ways. So locally, we might want to just barter with people or use precious metals in those sort of hand-to-hand transactions. If we're transacting with somebody elsewhere in the world, we might want to use cryptocurrency, etc., etc. So it's, in fact, the more ways we have of trading, the better, really. It's building that resilience and that width of options that we have. Here's a quote from, what's his name, Sean Stone, who's the son of Oliver Stone, that's right, isn't it, the filmmaker. We want to be interfacing and interacting with folk we know and with whom ideally we have mutual understanding and principles, rather than contracting with people who are pirates and scoundrels such as banks. What gives them the right to create money? I also have the right to issue my own currency. And there's currently a paradigm shift happening with finance and economics which we can all become a part of. So that's what I would like to encourage you to do. And here's a meme which I throw in because I absolutely love it. I've just tested positive for sovereignty. What do my symptoms include? Critical thinking, bodily autonomy, speaking my truth, the gift of discernment, standing up against tyranny, advocating for our children, and socially distancing from the system. Yes. So moving beyond those decentralised solutions, we can then think about the possibility of a gift economy, which is moving even beyond money itself, having money and trading with, you know, not trading in fact. But here we go, here's a quote to set the scene. We've all been given a gift, the gift of life. What we do with our lives is a gift back. So gift economies are societal systems that operate through exchanging gifts between parties. The gift is a voluntary transfer of goods or services, not requiring a compulsory transfer in return. So I'm just giving something to you because I want to, and that's it. I'm not expecting anything back in return. Everyone has a gift, be it knowledge, skills, services, commodities, that if shared could rapidly solve a pressing need elsewhere. People and organisations can get their problems solved or solve other problems. And if you think about it, we were born into a gift economy practiced by those who mother us, enabling us to survive. So the economy of exchange, where there's a quid pro quo, I give you something, you give me something, that tends to lead to separating people from each other and making us more adversarial. Now, I'm not saying means of exchange aren't useful and aren't a part of the way forward, but if we go beyond that, where we're giving gifts, when we're creating mutuality and trust, and the gift economy in its culture is a way to peace and abundance for all. And in fact, what the gift economy comes down to is generosity and gratitude. So just to give you a simple example, I've got an orchard. It's the autumn time, my trees are giving off lots of apples. Hey ho, I've got all these apples. Well, I can't eat them all, but I'm feeling generous. I want to give you all apples, right? And you can then feed your family and make apple pies, and you know, we can all have a wonderful shared meal together, and you know, with apple pie and custard or whatever at the end of it, etc., etc. So I'm feeling generous, you're feeling grateful. Now, somebody else might have a load of pear trees and they're in abundance of pears. And because they've received this gift, they're much more likely to feel generous themselves, because there's this mutuality and goodwill that's been created. So then they're feeling, well, I want to share my pears with everybody. Yeah. Now, further down the line, when my house gets hit by a storm and gets damaged, or or gets burnt or blown away or whatever, and I'm in real trouble, then you guys are all going to rally round and help me rebuild my home or repair my home or do what, So it's that fantastic community vibe that's created. And of course this is how people lived for many a long year before money came along, whenever it did. So we've lived this way in the past for a long, long time. Now, I'm not saying it's going to work in every situation, of course it isn't. Really, it's all about our very close-knit community, people that we know, people that we love, people that we have face-to-face connections with, and so on. And that's where a gift economy is really going to work. Of course, if I'm trading with somebody, if I want something, elsewhere in the world, or even just the next town along, it's probably more likely that I'm going to want to be thinking about a means of exchange, so exchanging. But in our local community, I think a gift economy can really work, and it just creates a great vibe. Essentially, does that all make sense? And here's something I wrote just to put that into a little poetical bit of wording, if you like. It's called Real Wealth. Money isn't wealth. Possessions aren't wealth. Reputation isn't wealth. Real wealth is vibrant health. Real wealth is family. Real wealth is community. Real wealth is an abundant, thriving earth. Wealth is the gifts you have given. Wealth is the strength of your connections in the web of life. When we are on our deathbed, are we really going to be thinking, oh, I've got so many pounds in my bank account, haven't I done well in this lifetime? No, I'm going to be thinking about, what are all those magical moments I've had with my family, with my community? How have I been generous in the world? How have I helped to make the world a better place? That's what I'm going to be thinking about and going to be proud of. And I love this quote from Percy Bysshe Shelley, which some of you will know quite well by now. Rise like lions after slumber in unvanquishable number. Shake your chains to earth like dew, which in sleep had fallen on you. Ye are many, they are few. And always remember that, okay? The power is with us. So that just gives that in visual form there, releasing the dove. So my concluding remarks: it's time to see through this sophisticated deception, reclaim our power and sovereignty, reconnect with ourselves, with others and with nature to create a truly magnificent world. And we want to reach out to others in this regard, yeah? So let's come all full circle and remember the work of David Sharon Boys, particularly to help us in that way, to reach out to others and extend our community outwards and include more and more people. I want to just thank Bob Moran, and there's his the cartoons we had along the way, and there's his website if you want to check him out. And and there's my contact details and website. Feel free to come over and check out my books. And I've got a few health items which I use myself and would recommend, and therefore want to make them available to you as well. And yeah, please. Well, we'll have a break now, and then actually bought one just to show people. And this is another. There's all sorts of solutions popping up these days. But gold back is essentially what it is. It's a laminated piece of gold. So it's real. It's making gold tradable, really, because if you have a gold coin, it's got a lot of value, whereas this has got much less value. It's a thousandth of a troy ounce of 24 karat gold, and with a beautiful design on it. We might want to trade in gold backs.
So they're roughly worth about 4 or 5 quid each?
I think I bought this on eBay for about, yeah, I can't remember, about a fiver, roughly, 5 or 6 quid.
I think you bought 4 or something for...
I got 5 for 20 quid.
5 for 20 quid.
Yeah.
Apparently there's 20 places you can get them from.
Yes.
If you go to the website of, I can't remember, it's something.
Anyway, I'll have this up on the table here if anyone wants to look at it.
Yeah.
Great. Yes, back to the break.
Kettle's on.
Part 2.
Come on, questions. Fire your questions at Daniel.
Right, I've got a question at the front here.
Can you tell us anything about BRICS and the BRICS nations and all that?
Okay. Great question, thank you. I'll just wait for people to sit down. Well, in the I haven't done extensive research on BRICS, but it doesn't take much of scratching under the surface, in my view, to realise that BRICS, okay, it's not black and white, and they may be putting two fingers up to an extent to the kind of existing monetary system, but basically the BRICS people and the countries and the whole system is still very much enmeshed with the World Economic Forum, and if you look at all the BRICS countries, Brazil, etc., they all have central banks which are private and at which at the behest of the Bank for International Settlements. So it's ultimately no different. They're all bringing in central bank digital currencies, etc., etc. So they're not saviours. Okay, there aren't saviours out there. BRICS aren't going to save us. Donald Trump isn't going to save us. It's about us. For me, it's about be the change you want to see in the world. That fantastic quote from Gandhi. There's nobody out there. I mean, yeah, great if we do have. There does a saviour come along, but it's really about our empowerment, our sovereignty. Yeah, and the whole system is fundamentally flawed. We want to get rid of the whole system altogether. We don't want states at all. Yeah. What are these artificial things that are just all about violence and coercion? And, taking away our money, our taxes, and so on. Yeah. So that's where I'm at with it all. I hope that makes sense. Yeah. Question there.
I'm not into everything you said about the new ways as far as money and exchange is concerned. But how do you convince the superpowers that this is the way forward?
I'm not going to convince the superpowers. I'm just going to get on with it on the ground. That's what I'm saying. That's what decentralised solutions are all about. It's about us. I'm not, as I say, I'm not looking out there for any saviours or to convert any superpowers. No, they're in for themselves. That's that's the old paradigm. I want to create a new paradigm. Yeah, and I want to do it with you guys.
So if we refuse to go give our custom to shops that are card only, I would.
Absolutely, yes. Say, look, I mean, the thing about this whole campaign to keep cash, yeah, it's important because within the existing system, the existing system at least is better compared with the CBDCs. But ultimately, what is cash? It's still part of the debt-based money system. So let's not think that's the ultimate solution. It's just a temporary fix to try and keep cash going. Right? We want to get rid of all Bank of England debt-based money, don't we?
But if we think of like credit card and that type of thing, it's like their tracker one.
Yes, absolutely. If there's a shop or a whatever out there that's saying we're not taking cash, I'm not going to go there for sure. And what I do is I always carry enough cash around with me so I can always pay with cash. I mean, obviously, if I want something online, then I have to pay. Inevitably, you can't get through life at the moment, unfortunately, without buying stuff and doing stuff online. Be it, just getting tickets for an event or whatever. So yeah, I will pay with a card then, but otherwise I will always pay in cash. And I will tell people why I'm paying in cash whenever I do that. Did you know I'm paying in cash because I want to make sure that to begin with, part of the money I'm giving you isn't being siphoned off by the bank, which it would be if I paid by card. So that's the first thing. You benefit as a business. I want to give 100% of my money to you. And if I'm going to pay online, I want to do it by bank transfer rather than by PayPal, for example. That sort of thing.
True, but that, Daniel, I used to pay money into the bank cash, but you get charged for that. I know they get charged a lot more for the cards, for having cards. Yeah. So a lot of companies, smaller companies are actually saying I would prefer you to pay cash because this is costing us more money.
Yeah, but
sorry, you mean
the smaller company has to bite the bullet and take the card, otherwise they lose business.
Oh yeah, no, that's why they're actually saying would prefer to take cash.
You mean they'd prefer to take card or cash? I'm getting confused.
Cash.
Yeah.
Because they're getting charged too much.
Oh, of course they're getting charged. Yeah, of course they're getting charged on their card payments. But most businesses now, that you'll say, "Can I buy this?" and they'll immediately thrust a card reader in front of you. And I'll say, no, I'm paying in cash. I always pay in cash. And the reason I'm paying in cash is because X, Y, Z. And I always do a little spiel.
I pay my utility bills with cash at the post office.
Yes.
I asked for a paper bill and I had to wait 6 months. I thought, well, it's your big problem, not mine, So after 6 months they actually sent me a paper bill. But I get my paper bill and I go to the post office, I pay by cash, therefore I'm keeping cash flowing and I'm keeping the post office open.
Yes, absolutely. And also I've got some cash. I always have a wad of cash at home because if tomorrow all of a sudden there's a big announcement, well, aren't you going to be so happy? We're saving the economy by bringing in the digital pound, and all of a sudden the balance in your bank account has been changed from pounds to digital pounds. Aren't you going to be, I'm going to be happy? It's going to take us out of austerity, or however they're going to frame it. Well, actually, no. I don't want anything to do with CBDCs. And at least at home, I've got a wad of these, which people recognise and understand.
What's your address?
And, well, come round to my house. And I've got some, gold and silver stashed away and whatever. Yeah, and I'm not cryptocurrency, but some people might have cryptocurrency or whatever. So there's ways that I can still trade that people will understand and recognise.
Because I'm talking about bringing in voluntary initially onto CBDCs as a kind of an incentive base.
Well, of course they're going to bring it in with with lots of it's usual carrot and stick, isn't it? Carrot and stick. Yeah.
Of course, it's always side stuff as well.
Have you heard about banking hubs that's starting to roll out everywhere? What's that about?
What's that? Sorry.
Small, banking.
Well, of course, there's lots of ways forward with social credit unions and all that sort of thing. So really, it's like it's finding what works for you in your local community and what works for you as an individual, and it's not going to be the same for everybody. And what I would recommend is just trying stuff out. Get together with a few. You don't have to have many people to start trading in Let's, for example, or start trading in gold backs or whatever you'd like to, just experiment with it and see if you can build on it and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, then maybe you want to go to something else or try a combination of things, So the important thing is that they're obviously going to bring in these CBDCs if they get their way as soon as they, at some point. It might take a few years. It might be this, the end before the end of this year. We do not know, but what we do know is that that's what they're aiming to do. So the more we get systems established now, even on a very, very small scale, at least they can be expanded. Because once those CBDCs come in, then much more people will likely to come on board, aren't they? So if we've got an existing system that we can roll out, in greater form, then we've got the seed of something that can grow, essentially. So that's what I would recommend. Don't wait for when the CBDCs come in. Get going now. We've got time to build these systems to get to see what works and experiment.
I've noticed the younger people, even if it's a can of Coke, they want to pay on the card. So no wonder a can of Coke.
Well, of course, with the younger people, they're, you know, as we know, the agendas and you know, the world is becoming one of people becoming cyborgs.
And they're all on their phones.
And they're all on their phones, and they're all in a very virtual world the whole time. You don't see children playing outdoors anymore, do you? Because they're on their screens. They're on their screens at school, they're on their screens doing their homework, they're on their screens doing social media and doing their gaming. And it's very, very sad to see.
Yeah,
which is, you know, which is why for myself, I have a principle of not having a mobile phone. I don't like them, I don't want one, I don't want to be contactable at all times of the day or night. But I also want to, and they're you know, they're bad for your health, and I get affected bad, you know, I just want to put one to my head and I get a headache. Okay, but also I want to be a role model of the fact that you do not have to have a mobile phone to live in our society. And I'm so glad that, you know, I was born in an era when we didn't have mobile phones or computers.
You don't see many cases where young people aren't wandering around staring.
You tell me about it, I see it all the time. We live in a dystopia, we know that, but we're here to create a better world. We're here to be pioneers, aren't we?
There is some younger people waking up, and because of social media, the word is spread a lot quicker than it would have in the past.
Yeah, well, as I say, you know, be the change you want to see in the world. Don't wait for somebody else to do it, you know.
I was on the metro the other day and it was absolutely packed. And this young woman had an epileptic attack and she went down like a bag of hammers. The woman who'd been standing beside her immediately got down on her knees. I got down on my knees and took her hands. Somebody else pressed the SOS buzzer. Somebody else was calling for an ambulance. When we pulled into the station, another big bloke came forward to lift her up. So people, you know, will work together.
They absolutely will work together, yeah. And of course, the powers that be know this, which is how there was, you know, I felt really envious of the fact that there was this amazing community effort, community vibe going on during the whole COVID era.
Yes.
But it was all to get people into the vaccination centres and this, that and the other, you know, but it was so the powers that be were, you know, the behavioural scientists and all of that sort of thing, were using that for their own ends. But it's there very naturally, and as you say, it just arises spontaneously in those moments.
Yeah. It's not that long ago. I mean, Nana was alive, and she never had a bank account. Never.
My life.
She used to do everything with cash.
More banks then. They're closing all the banks there. It's hard
Well,
to find
these bank accounts up though, I think.
the banks are open. You could just go in, couldn't they?
No, they should went the gas board and paid the gas bill.
Well, the thing is, it started, but when they started paying people monthly.
Yeah,
Then you had to, then, you know, you weren't getting your cash in your hand once a week. It was going into your bank once a month. You didn't have any,
what I was trying to say
that was when it
it
started.
worked very well without it, not that long ago. We really had a system. You know, we didn't have computers, we worked and they were 100% right. You know what I mean? It was quicker. And everybody knew what they were doing. It's not that long ago.
That's why I love the simplicity of the gift economy. It just strips that all away, and it's about what really matters, which is what I said in my little poem. It's about community, it's about family, it's about good vibes, yeah, and feeling part of something, feeling valued, feeling acknowledged. Smiling, human contact, so important.
There are allotments in the back gardens and whatever.
Allotments.
Those people that didn't have bank
Not
accounts
long
had
ago.
premium ones. If they got
Keep your
the
hand
money,
up,
they
Jamie,
put
or
it
you'll not
somewhere.
get heard. Keep your hand up.
No, I was just saying about community, because you lived off grid for many years, didn't you, Daniel?
That's right, I did.
And I was just, I don't think these people will leave people alone. I just don't think that that's sort of people.
The powers that be
Yeah.
want to control and manipulate us.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, let them do their thing, okay? We know about that, we know about the bullshit, we know about the agendas, right? It's important to be aware of all of that, of course. And that's why we want to make other people aware of it, and that's why I was talking about reaching. But once we've got to that place, if we're then just in a place of like, oh fuck, you know, they're all out to get us, then, you know, it's just more fear and it's just more disempowerment, isn't it? Which is where they put us at. No, we want to take back our power, we want to take back our control, we want to recreate community, build a vibrant community, be the change we want to see in the world, take back our sovereignty, yeah?
Is that what
And just
our chickens from the 1st of October?
And what was that?
Is that somebody said you've got to register your chickens? From the
Well,
1st of
bollocks to that, right? Just get on with it, yeah? And if you know, and lots of people aren't paying their council tax and their electricity bills and all of that, which is great.
Let's took my heating allowance off. How was I supposed to pay my heating bill?
I think we've got to learn the system like they know it. You know, people are learning how to sign off their debts so they don't have to pay them out of cash. Things like that.
Well, I'm not an expert on all of that, but I know Richard Vobes, for example, has had all sorts of people on talking about, you know.
It's got to be looked at.
Yes, yeah, and it's great that
Why
people
not?
are doing it.
Why
Yeah.
not? The MPs are
Yeah.
all doing something. They know how to do
You're
it.
getting
They're the way.
I mean, the whole system is a rip-off, and we you know, we're
They're
not.
laughing all the way, aren't they?
Yes.
Laughing.
You know, did I consent to, you know, there being a police force? No.
No.
So why should I pay for it? And be forced to pay for it, and if I don't pay for it, then I'm going to get fined or put in prison.
What would you do though?
You know, that is
That's
coercion.
coercion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not a
No
consent-based
is a
model.
very powerful word.
And what?
No is a very powerful
Yes.
word. And they
Yes.
look on people's faces when you say no.
Yeah, and so what is their system based on? It's based on kowtowing to authority, and it's based on fear.
Yes.
If we just say, well actually I'm not in fear, and I've got my community around me supporting me as well, which is really important. So for example in Cramlington, which is a fantastic example of this, you know, if the shit hits the fan, or if somebody, you know, somebody's being getting coerced or whatever, then everybody's going to, this is my understanding, perhaps you can correct me if I'm wrong, but everybody's going to, you know, the airbox is a venue where people can go and congregate any time of the day or night if needs be. It's a community hub, you know, which is fantastic. What a fantastic resource to have.
Can I just apologise for Thursday night when I started the debate on is it a flat earth or a globe? My God!
Oh, don't mention that. That's going to start everybody off now.
We're not talking about flat earth. That was me.
You never talked about that.
I did.
Can I just say, there are quite a few groups around the UK that are doing this, taking responsibility and creating their own, if you like, currencies.
I can't hear Christine's question.
Yes. So the other thing is, you know, we can learn from each other as well. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel each time, and that's where things like Richard Vobes,
Michael Telly,
and you know, and sort of those channels that we can, and all the people he interviews, we can get their experience and learn from their experience and hear about schemes that are going on across the country, etc. So yeah, that's the wonder of the internet in that regard, isn't it? Okay, well, should we just have one more question?
Right.
Yes.
It was just a comment, actually. It was
yes.
a guy that Richard Vobes had on from Australia who was talking about an affidavit. I mean, we've had people talking about affidavits before, but he seemed to be very clear on what you had to do to get out of the system and still exist quite happily.
Great, yes, yeah. Cool.
Have you heard of the Venus Project? It was talked about 20 years ago on British media. It was a controversial TV channel on Sky. They brought out all these speakers like Richard D. Hall and everybody like that used to go on there. It was the first time I ever saw them. And there was a guy, I forget his name, talked about his idea of the Venus Project, which is a futuristic way of living for healthy living on the planet and using the resources properly, giving back and stuff like that, very healthy way of life. I just wanted to mention it because it's still out there for everybody to peruse. It just gives you ideas of maybe how we can move ahead.
Sure, great.
Get rid of the globalists first.
Yeah, well, as I say, there's many different ways of doing things, and there are, you know, we can take these examples, and we can take these things that are being put out there, like Michael Tellinger's One Small Town, and we can either, you know, just repeat that, or we can adapt it to our area, or we can think, well, that's not going to work, or that doesn't appeal to me, you know. So there's no one size fits all at all. Go with what feels right for you and what's going to work for you, and experiment, as I said before. So I think we'll close this discussion now, because I know we're running out of time.
Yeah. Have you all enjoyed it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I always love coming here. This is a great group.
Much better than stuffed in the airbox.
Oh yeah, much better than all the other groups.